Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to GovSchool. We're going to have a session today on pandemic procurement and emergency spending. We'll get started here in just a second. This is a live version on YouTube, and so people will be joining us in both locations, Zoom and YouTube. Just remember that if you do post questions in our chat box, which you're allowed to, that you're to guard your own privacy. We do not ask you questions about yourself, but everything is recorded when we are on a live version. And we'll get started here in just a second. So once again, I'm going to welcome everybody here, and we'll have individuals coming into our room today at GovSchool. Our focus today is emergency procurement, and we're going to revisit pandemic procurement as we walk through some of the active opportunities that exist right now, focusing on the bids and contracts that are being funded through the federal emergency money, as well as those monies where it's matched at the state and local government level. And just as a reminder, our sessions are broadcast live and on our YouTube channel. And so please maintain your privacy. And we will have this week, on Friday, we'll have our Bidwink series. It's at April 16th at 3:15. We have a little fun, try to keep the money in your pocket so you don't get taken advantage of in different systems that are out there, and call attention to the ones where there's some potential problems. So we will make sure you understand how all that works. And then our GovSchool Focus series comes back. It's first and third Monday, this coming Monday at 3:30. It's a premium session for our active users. And so you can give us a call and get slotted into that. But otherwise, it's a $50 enrollment fee. And here we actually go in and focus in on particular items, such as the contracting instruments that are used, how to pinpoint an opportunity, talk more about your capability statements and your performance research, and then actual responses. We go over response to an RFP and how it was evaluated and awarded out. But different areas to help you in your ability to try to, our goal is to make you successful. And we think if we can teach you to win, then you win more contracts. So here we are today, and we have our focus on pandemic procurement as well as emergency spending. As we know, recently the American Rescue Plan was approved by Congress, and we here at GovDirections, we don't necessarily focus in on the political aspects of the pandemic responses, but more on the procurement side. Once the policy decision is made, we think our members are best served to win those contracts, and so we want to point out to you how to go about doing that. And that is the focus of today's ZoomCast that we're going to do. As we go along, if you do have any questions, you can raise your hand to speak, and we'll call on you to answer those questions. GovDirections, of course, we're located here in Atlanta, Georgia. We've been in this market segment since 1998. Our network now includes, we just actually passed 102,000 registered users who seek to do business with government agencies at some level. Some are actively involved already and understand how the fragmentation of the marketplace, why they need somebody like us. Others are just getting started, don't quite understand it yet, and we're walking you through that through the entry to level process of winning government contracts. And in 2021, this year, we're going to deliver just over 1.6 million listings to registered companies via a personalized daily email. And our members like that. If there's ever a problem with that, believe me, we hear about it right away. And so let me just pull up that PowerPoint, make sure we're looking at the same screen. Here we go. And so here we are today, where we're going to talk about the marketplace as a whole, the overview of COVID spending specifically. I'm going to share with you some past performance research related documents and see what the pricing structure is currently in order for you to actually go out there and win contracts, know where you need to be at in the pricing. And then I have open microphone for any questions. There's been 5 pieces of legislation that we want to call attention to where the funds are flowing through, starting back really about this time last year with House Resolution 6074. That was an $8.3 billion influx of funds appropriated specifically for the initial response on an emergency basis to COVID-19. And each of these I have a reference to as the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office. That is the independent body that provides an estimate in terms of cost and how the funds are actually going to be sent out to the various appropriated bodies. And so it's the message that is used to tell the Congress what they're actually doing. And so you can go back and look at those references. It's a neutral publication, but I always list that because that's where I generally go to find the actual what's actually being occurring and within a bill, so I can see where those funds are flowing and for what kind of projects that are actually going to be appropriated for. It was quickly followed by HR 6201, which is a $192 billion appropriation that actually started having a lot of itemized response requirements, going in and actually doing testing and so forth and setting up testing. And as we go in, we actually look at the legislation. We're focusing on procurement items, for example, tent rentals. At that point there was a lot of lodging contracts, hotels, rooms, and so forth as they were moving the National Guard around. And it also included some marketing and advertising dollars that were spent to actually encourage individuals to go out and get tested. Recognizing that this is going to have a significant impact on our economy, HR 748 was it's a $1.8 trillion piece of legislation. It starts to get up to that numbers when there's direct appropriations to American citizens. And so there we saw a significant amount of money going through to PPP plus the initial payment to help individuals get through that economic downturn. But once again, a significant portion involved in pandemic procurement that is going in and helping state and local governments specifically, or nonprofits and others who are helping to deal with the problem. It became more of a public-private initiative using private sector organizations, PPE, projects funded here, masks, so forth, gloves, and also going in doing test kits, things of that nature. So that was a very large piece at that time, one of the largest appropriation measures in recent history. But then it had the popularity of PPP, helping the businesses get through the payroll protection. They saw a need to supplement that again, came back with HR 266, and that was a $489 billion. But in this one, they actually included $100 billion that went specifically toward replenishing hospital needs and hospital products and supplies. And then, of course, they also went in and expanded the COVID-19 testing across the country. And then they sat and waited just a little bit. And then we found them come back here more recently with HR 1319, which is a $1.9 trillion initiative. This one includes specifically $350 billion in state and local and tribal government purchases and items to help replenish their budgets, but also to going in and making sure inventories are clear, are taken care of, and that we're able to deal with this in a sort of a long standing process and making sure that everything is working the way it should. And this bill, it also included an additional appropriation that was specific to citizen payments. And that once again pushed it up to a large number, now one of the largest, just in the combination of these responses to any federal emergency that in terms of appropriations in recent history. And so all this together, we're looking at some $6 trillion that's been placed into the market place specifically to help with the pandemic, and those monies are actively flowing at this point. And we want to make sure, and this is in just about every industry. So we want to help you understand how that's happening so quick, because they were able to respond. And, we always hear about a lot of hand wringing that's occurring, that's out there. But the fact of the matter is these government agencies have been working together pretty well. And they have been able to come in and actually provide a response in a coordinated manner across the country. And so it tends to be working. And we speak specifically to how that works and why that information, why it's necessary for you to know that, so that you can understand that you have to be ready to go, because that's the funds flow. It's not to a point where we're sitting back and waiting for a new program to be developed or something that's there. These funds are hitting the street almost as quickly as they're appropriated. And in the particular relief package that we hear under the current president, we see that there was a timeline here, and they use something called reconciliation, basically, where they went in and dealt with the existing budget resolution that was in place already and made some modifications, and that allows the monies to come forward somewhat quick. And we describe that at our blog, where you can actually go online and at GovDirections, and then you can come in and see at govdirections.com/blog. I'm going to kind of show you that. So if we ever have a special report, we'll lead you back to the blog through your daily alert and in the individual categorizations that you're monitoring. But you can also always come back here and read those articles that we're writing up and explaining how specific processes and appropriations work, so that you know where you can go and how to actually get access to that money. But reconciliation is a legislative process, allows it to move really quickly. And here, as we kind of outline the bill, we also always go in and talk about the individual procurement. For example, here's FEMA. There's $50 billion, lose my zeros these days. And this, whenever we use words like support, vaccine distribution, and assistance. Whenever you read that, you need to start thinking about it in terms of procurement and what do we really mean by support. Here, you potentially do an administrative support. So these are administrative contracts that are temporary staffing, for example, logistics contracts, transportation contracts, tent rentals, for example, furniture contracts, and so on. And so allowing these organizations to get into the field in order to help with vaccine distribution, and then making sure that people know that it's aware. This is another significant part of these funds are marketing, advertising companies doing video production, video distribution, and just generally event planning contracts and so forth. So we always want you thinking in terms of procurement. And here you also see with like VA, for example, another $13.4 billion, the Defense Production Act, going in on developing PPE, medical gear. And this is in both in the public sector initiative, and also a general public-private initiative where they're actually contracting to procure this through DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, but also using the Defense Production Act to contract with private sector organizations to beef back up the gear that they need. That's a $10 billion appropriation there. Significant amounts of funding going into that arena. Going into the community health centers, and these when you start talking about both not only public-private partnerships, but then public, sort of quasi-public. These are nonprofits that are out there, and others who potentially could be tapping into those funds. $7.6 billion there. The Center for Disease Control, and specifically a $7.5 billion appropriation. And here they're talking about tracking. These are basically contracts for to come in and to see contact tracing, for example, across the country. And as the decrease of the virus spread occurs, there are actually more contact tracing because they're actually able to handle that and go in there and actually do that. They use that process to identify where there's a significant problem. So look for those type of contracts to actually increase rather than decrease as the virus spread is decreasing. You also see mobile units and mobilization and other types of equipment that's being purchased. And going on into Indian Health Services, this is where we see some specific set-asides for particular types of organizations that have those set-aside designations. Be aware of those, and so on. So we break this down for you in our blog, but we're always pulling you back to the original congressional budget document and giving you those details. And this here's the actual resolution that was passed. If you ever want to find yourself reading to understand it, and also how the whole process itself would work, making sure that you understand that. And it's important that we do that more than just the typical, here's a contract opportunity, but here is the background so that you have that knowledge level. So what we've seen is what is traditionally a $4.5 trillion marketplace grow just this year by $3 trillion. And so we're looking at $7.5 trillion marketplace. That's what's active. And if you don't have really part of your business plan as a private company, you really need to have it there. It's such a huge opportunity for most businesses, and so we want to call attention to that. Unfortunately, though, it's a very fragmented system. And so while we may read that Congress has appropriated money, whenever it's actually procured, it's procured at a local government level typically, or a state government level, or even a sub-local government that is, potentially authorities that we create, who are often led by other local governments, or even a public-private initiative. So we want you to understand that here's just a graph of the number of governments just in the United States alone in 2012 census. Then over there on the right-hand side, when you go look at this graph, you can see there the actual link, but it'll give you the types of organizations, from housing authorities to local hospital authorities to airport systems, all with the ability to buy. There's over 35,000 cities and towns in the United States. We have 3,000 counties, over 12,800 school districts. That number has actually grown to about 17,000 different types of school systems, from charter schools to individual home type situations, all with now necessary procurement items related to the pandemic. In fact, one of the largest spending measures that I've seen more recently relates to HVAC contracts and air purification and filtration in our school system. Just about every school district is going to be putting in new HVAC, oftentimes engaging that with clean energy initiatives, or going in and using the roofing systems at the same time. So they will have on their capital improvement plan maybe a planned roof recovery or re-roofing system over a period of time. Maybe it's out 2 or 3 years, but seeing those pushed up now in order to do a project at the same time with the HVAC. So you want to make sure you watch in different areas of your business so you can see those potential contracts out there. And then we have all of these special districts, and we like to govern ourselves locally in the United States. Oftentimes the special districts are authorities, and we use those for contracting purposes. So a city will come in and they'll create underneath the city, for example, a housing authority. They may do a Main Street authority, a community development, a business district authority, so that they don't have that in their books for the actual individual government at the city level, but at a sub level with it's contractually obligated through that organization they've created for that purpose. And then they oftentimes put people on that with boards in the community who are experts, potentially, for example, in hospitals, bringing on the board doctors and others who understand the spending needs and measures in the community. And so we want to make sure you don't miss out on the special districts. And oftentimes you don't even realize, just here in Atlanta, metropolitan area is probably 1,000 different local governments on average that we will point to that are actually buying routinely. So this fragmented system, I use a puzzle to illustrate that fact. It's not broken, just like you pick up a puzzle box and thousands of pieces, and you start putting it together and it makes sense. And that's what GovDirections does for our members. So when we come in and we actually look at something and we're tracking that, we're going to go in, we're going to actually pull specific details. Once again, staying away from the political aspects, but going in and saying, hey, where's the money actually flowing to in this bill? You've made the decision now to spend it. We want our members to capture it. So when we look at it, we look at it in terms of, going in and making sure that they have in-person learning, improving ventilation. That's the HVAC. They're buying PPE. They're going to be looking for additional space. That's their modular building industry for our organization. They may be going in, and if they're going to deal with laying and also hiring additional educators. So that both means temporary staffing as well as human resource related contracts, reorganization, compensation and classification studies, different industries that our members are working in, providing support to students. These are more mental health related activities, mental and developmental side, also just with youth programs, recreation programs, and so forth, even to a point where, making sure that buses are equipped with technology, going in and having Wi-Fi hotspots and devices, and to help them with remote learning and supporting educators. So in IT, we beefed up our IT education category. We beefed up our IT broadband category recently, with significant amounts of money going into broadband initiatives. Because you see in that Wi-Fi, there's a combination of making sure our schools in the rural areas have this capacity, but also for economic development purposes. So trying to, going in and capturing two things at once. And so that's a smart way to make sure government is efficient. So we're calling attention to those type contracts and making sure that you are aware of those. And so we read through this for you and illustrate that there's 122 billion just in this particular department and where and how it's going to be distributed out. In fact, we published more recently by state and calling that to the attention of our individual members by state. And that could be from anything from, we have one client who's specifically doing desk shields and making sure just about every school system now has to have desk shields in place. And so it's a significant marketplace for any individual. But whenever they go in and they use emergency spending measures, they always have to refer back to the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, and you'll see that FAR definition. And so FAR is always at acquisition.gov. And so you need to go in there and then learn that system so that, for example, I'll go to acquisition. Here, when you get there, they'll refer to maybe an individual bid as FAR 15.1 or 0.2. This is for typical solicitations, but you just click on 15 and then go down to 0.2, click that, and it's going to be the section. They're legislatively mandated. It has to be easy to understand. You should be able to read it in regular English and be able to, as a common business owner, understand what they mean. So they always have worked. It's somewhat easy to use, and you just step through there, and every single bid that's used in emergency appropriations will speak to how FAR is being used to allow them to do that. Oftentimes, the disaster relief contracting part of it governs emergency spending. And so the Thomas T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act governs it. This was signed in law in 1988 and was amended from the initial one in 1974. It requires FEMA and other organizations to first contract with businesses located in the affected area. Now, with the pandemic situation, that's basically nationwide. But if we're looking at a particular targeted reaction, we could start going back to that methodology here as certain areas the virus continues to move away from an emergency capacity to more a maintenance practice. And so when they do go back and beef up, then they could potentially try and make sure they work there. So it's important just to say that you need to go in and make sure you're registered appropriately within the system for award management, and make sure you complete the disaster response information section. This will allow them to step in and target you if they're procuring in that local area. And while this overall subject is emergency spending, and we're focused so much now on pandemic, but traditional emergency spending is more for hurricane season starting up. We've now entered into tornado activity, other types of natural disasters where they also use the same legislative requirements to procure. And so when you go into SAM, and you can just search your records, for example, it's going to pull up, and over on the right-hand side, it's going to allow you to go in and see the disaster response registry. That link is there. And so if you were, for example, at sam.gov, you would click here to find your company. As you start to find it, you'll see over here, disaster response registry search. You could do the same search to make sure that your company is eligible for disaster related bids. And this is quick action bids. Okay. So make sure you are registered there. If you're not, it's simple to do. Just step through the instructions. And what they're going to do is ask you to fill out a form. And it's a basic form, nothing complicated. You're going to submit that back, and then you will get on that list for FEMA. The FEMA list is then pushed down to your state and local governments who are doing most of the contracting in that emergency situation. Excuse me, let me take a drink there. And it's also worth mentioning that your state's emergency management will help govern this, as well as your local county that you're in. So you might want to make sure that you're already on any sort of request for information they may have. And the way to do that is to go into, just Google, and we do link to this in GovDirections under disaster area. But in Google, just put the name of your state, Georgia, for example, in Georgia Emergency Management Agency, and then it'll pop up and it'll show you how to register as a local, in their local database for the RFIs that they actually do out there. And so make sure you are registered there at the local government level. Now at GovDirections, we have a number of keywords that we actually work with and to help you. And so like PPE is one of those. And also at our front page, we are linking directly specifically to COVID-19 and also disaster recovery. And so you can click on those. In addition, we're monitoring infrastructure bids as our government gets ready for another $2 trillion to $4 trillion investment in infrastructure. And infrastructure is taking a very broad definition. It's already clearly, that's going to be the intent. So it's going to be in just about every one of our RFP categories that we have. So we'll continue to identify those funds, and there will be slight place with the word infrastructure in there, but the more traditional infrastructure packages can come in specifically under the categorization of infrastructure here. And so when we're looking at, for example, broadband, I spoke to that. So if you click on there, you'll see the individual title of the bid, the due date, the state that it's in, and then the level of government that is issuing those. And as you can see there, state and local government is by far the most active. There's probably 20 contracts at the state and local government level as there is for every one federal government contract. And so whenever you go in there from something as simple as, fiber optic line installation, you're authenticated. And once you're authenticated, and then you click on the bid, it'll give you the bid title. Of course, you have the ability to save that bid in a personalized folder. But our main goal was to always get you to that original source. Okay. Once you do that, you're able to leave us. You're at the RFP, and then you can respond directly back to that government. The government wants you working with them. At that point, we have left you. There's no additional fees of any kind, no finder's fees or anything like that. It's we served your purpose, got you there. If you're not quite sure where Cape Girardeau is at, we'll help you out with a little map. Sometimes you have to go on site with that. Look and to discuss it with them. There's a nice town there. I've been there before. In fact, Cape Girardeau is we've worked there for the city once before, and so you can go in there and you can learn more about that and in that process. If there's something we need to add for competitive intelligence, we'll tell you. We also in an RFP category specifically under COVID, we've got a supplies category and a services, and these are specifically for PPE. Masks, face shields, things of this nature, opening up active calls. For example, here's one for Ron Round Independent School District, looking for you to respond back to them. There's one in New Mexico, is out this week, due medical lab supplies. Another more PPE, and I heard somebody say the other day it's a saturated marketplace. Well, it might be in the private sector, but in the government, they've been purchasing PPE for decades. This is not something new. And while there may not be in that emergency where they basically went through their supplies in their inventories overnight, but they're back in the period of time we're seeing in their budgets, they're replenishing their inventory, they're buying and preparing for long-term needs. And so in any person, in basically any level of interaction with the public, you will see this probably in the near future for at least constantly, and from someone paying water bills to recreation individuals who are helping with our kids and so forth. And so you can see those types of bids. So here we are. I'm at the 30-minute mark, and I wanted to walk through today with our various PPE related or disaster spending related to help you know how GovDirections tries to help you work smarter and save you time. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have. Anyone have any questions? Well, I thank you for your time today. This was a recorded version on YouTube. And so if you do have an interest in watching again, you can go to our YouTube channel, GovDirections. And let's see if they just come straight up when you look. Might be my personal YouTube initially. Yeah, let's see there we go. And you can look at the channel. Here's the emergency spending. We're live right now, watching ourselves live. And so it's a delayed response. So here we go. And you can come here and like it. And we certainly appreciate that. And you can subscribe to the channel at the top and be alerted to that and you get access to it. So thanks a lot. And everybody have a great afternoon.